Hello to everybody out there from here in Frankfurt. Happy Tuesday, and we're coming to you from the wet area of Frankfurt. I think it's that way all over the state. We're going to start bringing our boats to work, I think, and driving our boats and parking them outside. We're trying to figure out how to avoid the rain. So, anyways, got Dee Dee Connor here with me, myself, Mike Lettingham, Bill Coleman, Bob Hackworth, and Chuck Austin is right off to the side here, who will jump in on some of our topics today. We do not have any questions today on Go Soapbox. However, we will have it up for any kind of topics that you all might want to bring up or questions that you have, and we'll certainly be looking at that and addressing those as we go forward throughout the different topics that we do have.
We love your feedback, so put it out there. So
Absolutely.
It's always good for us.
We definitely want the questions and we want the feedback. So we're going to jump right into our agenda and proceed forward. Phil, you're going to take a couple items here.
I'll take a couple. So it seems like for a couple of years that we have been bantering around the idea of how we do and go forward with virus protection for K through 12 schools, and particularly endpoint protection. And we currently have the McAfee, the EPO solution that delivers that and manages it. And we've taken opportunity to listen to our school districts. We had the CIO Summit, which was great feedback. Our feedback that we get every year at the end of the year, we call it the annual feedback from the districts. And talking to the regional engineers, I've been to several regional meetings with the KEs, and it's just kind of really had to take an opportunity to get some really, really good information and get a good feel for how school districts, feel about the decision maybe to go from McAfee to something else.
Well, we had this as a CIO top.
It was
discussed at the CIO
right,
Summit.
Right.
I think we actually had a special webcast on it.
We did have a special
and
webcast
talked about
on
it.
it,
So
right.
we've had a variety of ways in which
Yeah.
we've been discussing this topic. Yep.
So I think we've listened to our school districts, and for right now, we're going to stick with the McAfee solution for K through 12 as it is. We're currently in negotiations with McAfee on the renewal of that, which takes place, I think, in September, late September. So, but for districts, so we had a few districts that felt like they wanted to do something on their own, and we'll certainly entertain that. We have a waiver process currently. Work through your KE on that, and we'll look at that waiver. It's, I guess for me, it's really important that we have virus protection for all school districts. And just one school district that doesn't have good virus protection has the ability to impact all of them. So we just want to make sure that we've got really good virus protection. If a school district feels like they want to take that on themselves, we'll certainly let them do that and help guide them through that if we can, if it's something that we can do. So, but that's it's a decision I think that we've been trying to make for a while, and I think it's a good decision based on the impact that we'd have in K through 12 schools, and based on the information that we've gotten, feedback we've gotten.
So I know I always try to speak to this as what's our short-term plan and what's our long-term plan, and I think that we're identifying that this is, for all intents and purposes, both. It's our continuing doing what we're doing, allowing the consideration and option for districts that have an alternative way to approach this, to present that information via the waiver process. And I do think it's important to point out that the waiver process, in some instances, is able to be kind of anticipated as far as it's an option. In other words, it's not so much a waiver as in I want to do something that really has to take a lot of scrutiny or consideration outside of what maybe a product standard or one of our standards, as much as we're recognizing up front that we know there's going to be districts that are going to want to have a waiver to the product standard being McAfee. But it still is important to do that waiver process. Now, that's kind of to reemphasize it so that we know what we got going on and what the districts are doing. And then for the long term, this is really our plan yet. I mean, meaning that we're not identifying a separate, different long-term strategy at this point.
Correct. So I think there's a couple things. We need to know school districts that are anticipating moving away from McAfee. We kind of need to know that. So we're going to kind of pose a survey question, I guess, not on to go soapbox this time, but probably through our CATS engineers, and they're going to kind of collect that information for us. And so we need that information because that really helps us to size the licensing. So if we have a school district that says, well, I want to do Defender and I want to do the Microsoft ATP and on their own, and then we should be able to reduce our licensing footprint. We don't want to buy licenses for two different sets of licenses. So that's a real important question. Then over the years, we still need to continually take a look at this as we reduce our footprint of Windows machines, and as we get more comfortable with the technologies that are out there, like Intune and those kinds of technologies. So, and then the reduction of Windows 7. So, which really is the next topic. We still have a lot of Windows 7 out there, and that's one of the inhibitors, I think, of us moving to something different other than McAfee. Or it's an inhibitor, I guess, for a school district to say, I want to do something different, like Intune or something to manage those workstations. So we still have, I think, about 70,000 Windows 7 machines, but that's a big reduction of what it was this time last year. So school districts have made tremendous gains on reducing that Windows 7. Just as a reminder, Windows 7 goes end of life.
Thank you.
End of December. Right?
There you go.
So, and end of life doesn't mean it quits working. It just means that Microsoft is no longer providing support for that, security patches and those kinds of things. So it puts, those Windows 7 machines actually put us more at risk at that time.
So before you talk more about the Windows 7 stuff, you made a couple points that I want to emphasize, because I know districts have heard us talk about this. Part of the driving reasons we were looking at the virus solution, the virus protection solution, was cost, because we always are looking to identify where we can either reduce or redirect cost associated to anything. And obviously with virus protection, we know that there are some alternative ways in which we can do virus protection. Some of those are things that we feel really comfortable we have available to us, really in what some folks would say in duplication to us doing McAfee. And so I guess my point I'm wanting to make is that's going to be something we continue to look at. And with the game plan that we're exercising with continuing McAfee, we are making some changes and adjustments where we still anticipate identifying some cost reduction. And then part of that goes into where you were talking about the licensing and so forth. And I guess what I want to point out to our districts is that was one of the primary driving forces of why we were looking at McAfee McAfee and virus protection, was to ensure that we're providing a solution for the enterprise as a whole that is most efficient and cost effective, and that we're again trying to eliminate and reduce costs where we can. We've come to the determination we can't do it quite to the extreme that we might have thought we could, and that we examined and looked at, and too much risk, too much, we're putting ourselves in too vulnerable of a situation if we jump too far as what we're doing.
Sure.
But it's going to be something we continue to look at. We're going to continue to identify some cost savings by making some changes and adjustments to how we're doing it. The other thing, which is kind of along the same vein of thought, I suppose, is that obviously, if our negotiations of a new agreement go south for some reason, and I say this, and I don't want anybody from McAfee to take it as a threat, but by the same token,
Well, I would say it's very much a truism.
If our agreement does not work out to what we're anticipating it will, as far as the way that we will manage that relationship going forward, that would put a whole new discussion on the table about what we're doing. And I say that just because you mentioned that we're still working on negotiating that final agreement. Absolutely. And so I think it's important to point out that is something that, that could be something that throws a wrench into the whole thing, but we don't anticipate that at all. I mean, I know that we don't anticipate, I know that we feel good about it and so forth, but it is something that yet does have to be completed.
I
to
know
kind
at 1 o'clock
of, to
today.
complete the circle of what it is that we're wanting to accomplish here. So I just wanted to mention that, so that people don't think that that we don't realize that's still something we've got to close the loop on. All right, so finish up on the Windows 7 or continue with what you did.
I don't think I have anything else to say about Windows 7, Bob, from a security perspective.
Well, obviously, we just need to go ahead and try to get rid of the Windows 7 that's out in the environment. End of life does mean that it is going to stop being supported, and a lot of those vital patches, and there have been more and more of those coming out, are just going to stop. And so what you really want to do is try to find some other way to do whatever those machines are doing, either update the OS if you can, replace that machine if you possibly can, and just sort of move away from that OS.
One thing that I'll mention about Windows 7 is, the importance of us understanding where we're at with that as it relates to online assessment. And what makes me think about that right now is that on the way up here, I was stopped in the hallway and ended up in a conversation about where are we with our game plan around Windows 7, and the fact that there is some planned testing coming up with our assessment programs, and around the operating systems and so forth. And so there was interest in that game plan and where we're at, which obviously we're working on getting more detailed about the direction, the guidance that we provide on that. But it obviously online assessment is a huge area for us moving forward. Got a lot of momentum, a lot of good things happening, and what we're doing with the operating systems and the machines and anything else as it affects our success with online assessment remains as a top priority for us. So just mention that as something that affects that.
So before we leave Phil's
Yep.
type books, we
Okay.
have a virus protection question.
Okay.
Is there a possibility of passing any of those cost savings to districts who have opted to take responsibility of AV on their own?
That may be my question.
Well-
I think we're looking at it to, we have a huge driving force to increase bandwidth. And so, we're looking at where can we save money to increase bandwidth for school districts. And I think that's our initial thought, but I know we've had some discussions and we've had other districts ask that question.
Well, that's a valid question, and I don't think
Yeah.
that we've got a clear answer for it, other than I would say, obviously, our goal is to identify cost savings, and we want cost savings to be beneficial to the enterprise as a whole, to the environment as a whole. But I know that that's probably more of a pointed question than that, meaning that a district is saying, hey, I'm taking on this responsibility individually as a district, and I'd like to see more individual benefit from that. I don't have an answer for that. It's a valid point. I think it's something important for us to make sure we're clear about. It's very similar to the out-of-band management solution that we're doing, where, and I know we've talked a little bit about it, where we've got some districts that are going to have to continue to maintain an individual circuit going into their site because they don't have good enough cellular service for the new out-of-band management solution we're putting in place. Whereas most districts are going to be able to utilize the new service we're putting in place and eliminates that telco circuit that has to be there. And that's a cost savings for those districts that don't have to have that telco circuit anymore. And so how do we handle that? So it's a similar kind of conversation. So it's a very valid point. It's one worth us making sure that we are clear about, and we manage as best we can, and we provide the benefit as best we can for the districts that are doing things to be efficient.
And I think any cost savings, I think the two priorities for us are bandwidth and offers of assistance. So, those things that we continue to want to put support in as much as we can, so.
Any other things right now? Okay. So we'll move on here. The next topic is our voice solution strategy. Somewhat similar to at least the process that we've went through with the virus protection. We've got voice contracts that we admittedly know are not meeting the needs and are not really, they weren't structured, and we haven't updated them to where they really are providing the kind of solutions that we know districts are interested in. Nothing against the holders of those contracts, because that's the contracts that we put in place and are in place. Those contracts expire in February of 2020. And we had multiple discussions. Again, it was a topic at the CIO Summit. We've had, I know the CATS engineers, our field staff, have had multiple conversations with districts. I know that me personally, as well as others, have had a lot of one-on-one conversations with districts, a lot of different conversations about how do we provide the best strategy going forward for voice solutions for districts. And so where we are is that we feel like it's in the best interest to move forward with not going through the process to identify new contracts. We right now are planning to let those contracts expire when they come up in February of 2020. And our intention is to go forward at that time with a very specific set of guidelines and technical standards that are to be followed by districts for voice solutions. We expect that districts will have, well, we know districts will have the ability to utilize contracts that are out there, state contracts. There's several contract vehicles that are out there that do provide for voice solutions to be purchased, a variety of ways, services, systems, if you still want the hardware, you feel like that's best for whatever reason, hosted, a hosted type solution. I mean, there's a variety of ways. And then also it will allow for districts to reach their own contractual agreement with a provider, a local provider or whoever it may be. Obviously, the guidelines and the technical standards will have some requirements that are to be followed because these voice solutions, in most instances, are riding on the network. And so there are things that must be followed and adhered to in doing that. So, again, the direction that we're planning to move forward with is that we will essentially do away with product standards, meaning that we don't have specific CATS contracts for voice solutions. However, we will maintain a very specific set of guidelines and technical standards that are to be followed. It will allow us to eliminate the waiver process. We've got several districts that have done a waiver to do voice solutions recently. We got several districts that we quite honestly know have done some things and haven't necessarily gotten a waiver, which is not necessarily the right way to do it, but that's okay. We understand that there's been challenges there, and again, part of this is to address the issue. So that's where we are now. I say that because we base that again on, and another thing I didn't mention was we had done a survey with districts to get feedback on this. And so what we want to do is we want to really kind of verify and confirm that that districts don't have anything that we've missed as far as concerns about the game plan as we see moving forward. And so the CATS engineers, our field staff, are going to be pretty aggressive over the next month to kind of have follow-up conversations with districts, whether it's through the regional meetings that occur or some one-on-one conversations. And so what I say to districts is, if you have concerns about our strategy on this moving forward, make sure you clearly voice that within the next month and that you identify, the specificness of what those concerns are about why this isn't a good idea, why this is. Because we did get a lot of districts, especially in our survey, that said they like the idea of us continuing to have contracts. But then as we began to question about what is it about that you like? What is the value of that? Because part of the reason we do contracts is to drive down cost. And we're not going to drive down cost unless we can ensure all districts, or at least a high percentage of districts, are going to use those contracts. And right now, we've got pretty clear indication that it would be some mixture. We can't speak to the exact, with certainty about what the percentage is. But certainly, most likely not anything that would drive down cost. So another reason you do it is to ensure performance and reliability and things like that. Well, we can do that through our guidelines and our technical standards to require that any solutions that districts put in place follow those. So again, that's kind of the thought process that we've went through. And again, we want to ensure that we want to make sure that we're representing the district's interest in this. Again, it's been one of those topics that has every time I've told people, every time I get engaged in a conversation about voice services or some kind of new idea or new thought comes up, because it's a very different environment today than it was 10 years ago when you talk about voice solutions, because really voice solutions a lot of times now is a software business. in a lot of instances, whereas for sure in the past it was a hardware business. And so, and I know there's still a hardware business to it, and in some aspects it can, still be primarily that, but in a lot of ways it's a software business now. So that's kind of where we are. I wanted to, and Chuck, I don't know if you had any comments, because obviously you've been a big part of these conversations. Obviously with the field engineers, we've captured a lot of feedback. I don't know if you had any comments, and obviously
No,
Phil.
Mike, I don't. Am I live here? I think you summed it up well. I mean, obviously, we're going to vet this out further through our field staff, so please be in contact with your appropriate representative. And it's really just a conversation of to what degree, and I'm just going to say it, to what degree do you want us to tell you what you need to buy versus to what degree do you want to have choices of what you implement? So at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So, yep.
But
I think it's really interesting how the industry is changed, just recently, and you see all the big players wanting to get in the voice business, and they've traditionally never been in the voice business. So it's and I think part of this is us reacting to that and making sure that we kind of stay current with what's going on in the world. I mean, there's viable options out there today that weren't out there this time last year.
yeah,
Well, I think
And
one
I'm
more
talking
thing-
about the good options.
Well, and one more thing, and we recognize this as a consideration, is the E-rate impact. Or shall I say, the lack of E-rate
lack of-
impact
right.
that we now have based on program rules. That has a tremendous, impact on the value of a district dollar and how far it goes, and therefore what they're willing, to invest at this point, so.
All right, so again, that's our direction that we're planning to move forward with. We are, again, kind of leaving that open for the next month to provide any reasons for us to reconsider or think differently about it. But right now, you can expect that you'll see more details about that strategy moving forward. Again, you'll be seeing I want to say a revised, but we've questioned how well we've provided anything to begin with, set of guidelines and technical standards. Obviously, we have product standards out there, and anytime we have product standards via contracts, those really act as the guidelines and so forth. But we are currently working on a separate set of voice guidelines and technical standards, and so you'll be seeing that in the near future. I would say in about the 1 month time frame is about what that will be. Want to mention leases real quick, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I know it doesn't affect everybody at the moment. However, I think all districts need to be aware and thoughtful about the fact that when you're going to be submitting a lease, and anything over $100,000 requires to be submitted to KDE for review and approval. And I really just want to mention a few things because there's 2 times of the year that this becomes a bigger topic. One is E-rate application season, and then toward the end of the fiscal year, before going into the new fiscal year, this is a heightened sense of activity around leases. And so I really just want to mention a few things. One is err on the side of providing us with detail. It is one of those deals where the leases go through several different iterations of folks up here reviewing and looking. Here in OET, we've got several folks that are involved in that. It goes through a legal review, and it comes back to OET, it goes to the commissioner's office. And I would say the more you can ensure you err on the side of providing detail, break down information as best you can, the better that will work. Also, ensure that your vendors they're following the guidelines, which we have on our website that are available, examples of the guidelines to ensure they're following the Kentucky rules around leases. That's one of the biggest things we'll see is where the vendors have not ensured that what they've provided you with is in alignment with Kentucky guidelines and rules around leases, and allow appropriate amount of time. Our goal is to turn these around in 2 weeks. Quite honestly, I've been telling some of my folks that we probably need to get away from even speaking about 2 weeks, because if there is any question, anything that it has to be absolutely perfect, and everybody that has in the review process has to be available in those 2 weeks for it to happen that quickly. It usually is 30 days. And if there's a question that comes up or something that has to be followed up on or clarified between us and the district or anywhere in between, you almost can figure a week for any time something comes up, a question that has to be followed up on, because time you communicate it, and then it takes 2 days for somebody to look at it and get back to you, and all those kind of things. And I say all that, and I know somewhat everybody will say, well, it's all kind of common sense and everything, but again, I feel responsible to make sure that everybody understands, because the last thing we want to do is be the obstacle for a district to have something in place before a current service expires or something like that, and they're found, you know, in a tough spot. So really be thinking ahead on how you're doing those. See if I had any other things here I wanted to mention real quickly. I mean, you know, we've had examples where the signatures haven't been there, which obviously those are obvious and shouldn't happen, quite honestly. You know, legal, quite honestly, points out things that are terms and conditions issues that, quite honestly, district attorneys or the process that is done there at a legal level, at the district level, should get caught. So I guess I would say emphasize to your folks that are involved in the process to do their part in looking at things they need to look at. Because we do have folks up here and again, as part of the legal process that are looking at things, and they're going to question things. And it's our responsibility to do so. So sometimes I know folks will think that we're being nitpicky or being a problem, but it's, you know, it's really our responsibility, and we're held accountable to do that. So anyways, I wanted to speak to that, and again, a big takeaway on that is allow enough time, have things as accurate as you possibly can, make sure that the folks that are signing off are actually reviewing and for their pieces, and err on the side of providing detail so that we have less reasons to have to ask questions or get clarification on things. Any questions or anything so far? Again, a real quick item. We mentioned this last time. We are currently working on and getting toward a point of finalizing our KETS operational plan and our technology needs report that is required to be submitted to the state board every year. This is something that we will have as a topic during our July district webcast, where we will review and go over this so that you guys are aware of things that are being submitted to the state board on behalf of the program as a whole. Have an opportunity to provide feedback. I think that there'll be a few other channels in which we provide for that opportunity, but it will be a topic at our July webcast, and it will be presented at the state board in August. Obviously, we have to have an approved operational plan and an approved technology needs, or we don't function. So the state board is required. We're required to submit it. The state board is required to review it. They're not required to approve it. They always have, and we certainly expect that will continue to be the case. But it is a required function. So definitely an important activity that we have going on. Real quickly, wanted to mention that we have a new provider for Dell for our the two contracts that Dell holds with us, being the server contract and the instructional device contracts. Encore Technologies was submitted by Dell and has been approved, so they have the ability to quote products and services and to provide services on behalf of Dell and those two contracts. So I want to make that aware. I think that may be news you all have already heard.
Taking the place of.
I wouldn't identify they're taking the place of anybody. I would say that they're been identified as new agent. There was somebody that is no longer there. Okay. And so we spoke to that, but Dell can have multiple agents.
Agents, okay.
Yeah. So again, districts may have already heard directly from them. The KETS field engineers, I know, were made aware of that, but it's pretty new information, so I don't know if they've communicated that yet. But I wanted to go ahead and mention that. And I got one other item I wanted to mention real quickly, and then I'm going to let Bob get going. Is that we have our annual vendor partner meeting. I mentioned this last webcast. I believe it's on July 15th, and that's an opportunity for our vendor partners to get some more insight into the things that we've got going on and to provide feedback, input, and ideas, and have those conversations. So I just wanted to kind of throw that plug out there real quick. That's going to be going on, and it is an important function that we do every year as well.
Mike, did I see where that's Skype
yes,
only?
I'm glad you said that. That is an online meeting. We're not doing that as an on-site meeting. And so what I would say is, for those that are watching that are from that vendor partner community, I'm not gonna say that we wouldn't have the ability to handle one or two people, and I say one or two being a little facetious, but it is intended to be an online meeting. We didn't identify a location to handle a bunch of people or anything like that. So I'm glad you said that. That's an important point. And with that, Bob, I'm going to let you get going on. I know we kind of said we was going to talk about password policy and single sign-on, but I kind of say it's security things in general and things you feel like are important to bring up today.
And that's awesome, because I was going to take that leeway anyway. However, because so much was already talked about in the last webcast where David and I both talked about security and kind of tag team security, I'm not going to rehash all that. The one thing I will say is something that I was a little shocked that he didn't say in that webcast, and that was that Kentucky, again, annually experiences over 4 billion attacks. And that's something we know. We're one of the few states that actually have the data, and I always want to remind people that this is why we're moving forward with security initiatives, that we know we have the data that show that people are trying to get into our network, not just the KDE network, I'm talking about the K-12 network, your schools, your district offices, all that sort of thing. We're all under attack, if you will. Some new reports that I've been looking at are showing that we are getting thousands of attempted logons from outside of the United States of America. And that's from all over the world. I'm not necessarily going to single out any country right now. But it is something that is pretty obvious to us that we need to start working on. And understanding what the risks are is like the first step. And so then we can move forward with part of the solutions. We are doing things like implementing DMARC and DKIM here at the Department of Education. Part of our goal is to get that implemented so that we can minimize the amount of phishing attacks and spam coming into the department. We're going to be putting together a best practice guide, and it may be pretty short, but it'll be some of the things that we learned as we implemented that we'll be able to share out with districts if you're thinking about going in that direction. If you're already moving in that direction, then I think that's pretty exciting, and I really appreciate that. If you have some questions, you can always send those up to the KET service desk, and we can kind of help out a little bit as far as we know. Because again, we're kind of going through this at the same time. We're going through it and doing our best to feel our way through that and learn as we go along so we can help the districts. There are some other things that we're also doing, but really passwords is one of those ground level technologies and ground level security items that we really need to start to try to work on. And I'm not going to necessarily talk about exactly what the password policies should be on this webcast, because I just don't think that's responsible. I am going to try to filter a lot of that information through the KEs down to the districts. And speaking of that, I'm really expecting and hoping that the KEs, and they're giving me some good feedback, will allow me to kind of work with some of the districts on a one-on-one basis and maybe a group of some of the CIOs out there to kind of help me think through some of what I would consider to be the common sense password requirements, and make sure that what I think is common sense is actually common sense for a school district and the offices and everything out there. There are a few things that I can say right now. For instance, I'm not going to come out and say no more complexity, for example. I'm not going to say you can't use numbers, upper, lower, symbols, that sort of thing. I think that is something that should be a local decision. I will have some best practices and some minimum requirements for staff. That's my goal in this. I'm not looking to provide or force minimum requirements for students, for example. I think that's also something that should be a local decision, although I probably will provide some best practice suggestions and provide some information about why I believe that would be a best practice and a suggestion. We'll be doing the same for your system accounts. We'll be doing the same for your global admin accounts. Things like account lockout thresholds, minimum characters, all that's kind of on the table. And if you have some specific questions about that or thoughts or ideas, I welcome those. And feel free to send those to me. Again, I'm not going to kind of throw those out on this webcast. Along with the password stuff, I do believe that we can provide our users with a better experience and improve the security. For example, here at KDE, we did implement, and I promised I wouldn't rehash things that I'd already talked about, but I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. Phil, months ago, we implemented the self-service password reset, and that has been pretty successful here at KDE, and one of the things that does provide is the ability for users to not have to go through the technology department in order to reset their password. So if someone, whether it's themselves fat fingering their password, or if it is someone in another country trying to log into their account and it gets locked out, then this allows that person to securely reset their own password and change it whenever they want. And I think that's an important part, and that probably should be part of this. I don't think we would be looking at increasing our password strength right now if we didn't have the self-service password reset.
It's a key part.
Already there, exactly. And then after that, what we also want to do in order to try to make this a good experience for folks is to try to make sure that they have to use their passwords as few times as possible. And you know, one of the ways you can do that is by implementing single sign-on wherever you can. And we've been working with Infinite Campus, for example, to try to make sure that, and many districts, trying to make sure that we can use one password to get into both our KETS accounts and Infinite Campus. And so I believe that there's a target date for all districts to have that in place by January 1st. And I was actually going to throw that over to Chuck, but he actually just walked out of the room at this point, so I'm afraid I don't have a whole lot more detail on that.
And Chuck's going to be the lead on that work. I think a lot of that will feed through the CIOs, so expect to be involved in that conversation. It's not a cases topic or an IT topic. It's really going to have to mean that you're working together to be able to understand it. We'll continue to promote as a single sign-on, and we're doing it through some of our trainings, but it will involve the CIOs, so don't think it's, oh, that's an Infinite Campus thing, I don't even know about that, because you do.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think a lot of this, and a lot of what I would consider to be, I kind of look at it as a security component, like self-service password reset. It touches the whole password conversation, even though it's not necessarily a security initiative. It's something that can improve the overall security. As you make things easier for your end users, the less likely they are to do things like write down passwords on Post-it notes and stick them on monitors and things like that. And so even though it may not be a security initiative, it impacts security, and I want us all to kind of look at those items as well and make sure our end users are having the best experience they can.
So, Bob, I think you bring up a great point, and you know, we've said that for years about people putting it's either under their keyboard or it's on their monitor, and we're not making that stuff up.
That's right.
There
It happens.
is real. In fact, there have been security breaches, and I guess it's breaches because of that just recently.
Exactly. There have been
In school districts, not here. But,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
so-
I guarantee I do tend to walk through the department from time to time, and I do see very interesting and obscure combinations of letters and words taped to monitors from
Yeah.
time to time, and I can't prove that they're passwords, but I bet they are. And so I think it's important for us to go ahead and always make sure folks understand that the basics still apply. You know, make sure that your password isn't shared out. Make sure you're not leaving it where someone can get to it. Because you just never know who's walking through your building at any particular time. So if your end users are sick and tired of hearing you talk about passwords, just let them know that the basics are really still key, and then that's kind of why we're trying to strengthen our passwords right now, to try to help them not feel like they have to do those things. Right. And that's really key. I think I'm done with passwords, but there's one more thing I did want to mention. We're midway through June, and this will be the first time I bring up 702 KAR 1:170, and that's KAR that KDE is going to have to do something about as well. That is our annual report to your Board of Education, the relative security of the data systems in your district. And that's something I'll be getting on top of here, and that's something I encourage all of you to not wait until it's August before you deal with this. If this is the first time that you have heard of this KAR, if you're a new CIO out there and you need more information on that, please feel free to email me. And again, I'm Robert.Hackworth in the gal. There's a Bobby Hackworth. He is a teacher in Prestonsburg, and he's probably tired of getting my email. So send it to Robert.Hackworth, and I'll give you some more information about that and kind of give you some best practices on that as well. Again, I'm working on it here at KDE. I know a lot of the CIOs out there are probably already working on it too. But this is your first reminder. I'll probably give you a couple of other reminders on the upcoming webcasts, and then probably in some other communications and other.
Is there a
groups that I'll
date
talk
by
about.
which that's to be done?
That's to be done by the end of August.
Okay,
So
yeah.
the final, your final board meeting before the end of August is one that you definitely want to target, if not one before. So please don't, like I said, don't hesitate on that, because that can take more time than you think. So that's
Also a good time to look at your annual notices.
oh, that's right.
You got
That's
COPA
right.
notices, you got FERPA notices, all those notices that have to go out every year. You know, make sure they're there, make sure you're on your website, and make sure your board knows about them.
That's a great reminder. I mean, data privacy is a whole part of this security thing, and parents are becoming more and more cognizant of how their data, their children's data, are being used or misused. And so we want to make sure that we give them all the heads up so that they have the information they need, and that you're helping to set their expectations as parents and their kids' expectations.
Great topics, I think, Bob. I think this is a good time to just remind school districts that the most vulnerable time, it appears to us, from the history, is when school starts, because the computers have been off all summer, and they don't get the patches, and then they start school up, and it takes a while to get all that kind of going again. So I think it's just, we always just try to tell school districts and give them some some advice about take care of those things, and make sure they're patched, and make sure they have good virus protection.
Yeah, don't,
Even during the summer, and
That's right. If you end up waiting until the start of school, you're doing a million different things at once, and you might see an email that normally you'd be feel might not seem right, but you'll go ahead and just rubber stamp it and let it go, or something like that. And that's what these crooks and fishers and folks are kind of betting on. They're waiting for you to get too busy to really pay attention, and then that's when they have their most success. And so just kind of be on the lookout for those things. Be on the lookout for the fishes. Make sure you're talking to your finance folks about the direct deposit scams, and everyone else. Make sure that you help let folks know to be on the lookout for missed payments into their bank accounts if they're on direct deposit, which almost everybody is. And goodness gracious, please make sure people don't fall for that iTunes gift card scam, because that's just crazy that someone would fall for that. And that's where someone might get an email saying, go out and buy $1,500 worth of iTunes gift cards, scratch off the pin, and send me a picture of the back. So make sure your folks know better than to fall for that. That's it. If there are questions or something, like I said, feel free to email me or put something on the GoSo box, and I'll get back to those as soon as I possibly can.
Questions.
Do I?
All right.
You want to
Yep.
go ahead and take them?
Well, I mean, as long as they're not asking me for specifics that I don't feel comfortable giving over the air, I'm happy to try to address.
Well, why don't I read them off to you,
Okay.
and some of them are acronyms that I'm just going to read the acronym. How about that?
Okay.
I said, first one is, if we don't have an EES with Microsoft, what are our options for self-service password resets? Do we have options?
I'll have to get back to that one. I don't have
Okay.
an answer for that. That's a great question, and that's something that I was actually talking with some folks on my way up here, just to make sure, because what we want to do is make sure that if you don't have an EES, that we're still able to improve the security as much as we possibly can. If that's your choice, or if you can't go any further because of budgetary constraints or whatever, then we want to make sure that we do everything we can. And there may be some other things that would be very helpful for those of you in that situation. But I can't give you details about that right at the moment.
All right. Is there a new or updated data security and best practice guide? The one I have has a date of 2015.
That is the latest version. If that's the data breach guide, that one is actually incorporated by reference into the KAR, which actually means that we are legally bound not to update it, which is interesting. However, there may be some updates that I can provide, not necessarily to that document specifically, but alongside of it. That is something that we are looking at here. There are some other documents that we're also looking at reviewing and make sure that they're updates. And this goes outside of the bounds of that conversation, but we have a disaster recovery kind of a handbook on the KD website, and that's something that Matt Jury, who's the KE for Region 7, I believe, and I put together after a couple of district disasters a couple of years ago. I encourage everyone to look at that document. What we're trying to do is put some real basic document management together to make sure that we're able to go back and know which documents need to be updated at least every year, that sort of thing as well.
Okay, I have heard concerns about users registering personally owned phone numbers with a self-served password reset and the security implications of that. Are these concerns unfounded?
That's another great question, and I'm actually talking with the security team today here in the department with Kenny and David and Wes, and that's a question that we'll probably get together and talk with them about, and then I'll reach back out after we hash that and provide some responses. So thank you all very much for this.
So let me make sure I understand the question. So they're referring to using,
It's a personal, like if I need to prove I am who I am when I reset
Right.
my password,
right?
then I can provide a local number. I can provide my personal cell phone number. And so when I need to prove that in order to reset my password, it calls my personal
Right.
phone number, and then I can go in and use that as proof I am me.
Right, which is the same way that all kinds of online
Banks, all that sort of
services
stuff,
use.
they do use that.
Right.
There are alternatives, though. It could be locked down to just like an office phone, for example, that sort of thing. I'm not sure that that's where I'm going to go, but again, I'm not going to say yay or nay on the webcast right at the moment, but it's a great question.
Okay, so you're going to be following
Yeah.
up on it, but
Yeah.
all right.
So I definitely understand, what that's about, but that's something I'll have to respond to afterwards.
All right, one more. Your thoughts on hardware devices like YubiKeys for MFA?
I'm a huge believer in multi-factor or two-factor authentication, and YubiKeys are one excellent form for that. A YubiKey, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it looks like a very small thumb drive, but instead of storing whatever sort of data you want to put on it, it actually acts as an authentication method. You would plug it into a USB drive, and some of them also have near-field communication, or NFC, and that would allow you to use it with your cell phone to authenticate. And what that will allow you to do is use that as opposed to typing in a password every time when you go to a certain service or a website or something like that. I promote MFA and 2FA, and I really enjoy seeing things like the YubiKeys or the authentication apps on cell phones. I think those are good as well, and we'll be able to provide some more information on that in the future. Hopefully that was a good answer for that question. I think what was my average 1 out of 4? Did I actually provide a response for
Well,
that?
that particular question got a lot of other feedback too.
Did
Just
it?
people, and we always like to see that, so that'll be good
Yeah.
to go,
Yeah.
for you to go
Yeah.
back and take a look at what others are saying and
Yeah.
thinking.
Now, there are different types of YubiKeys. There are different ones that support different types of authentication. Some are stronger than others. Some have different capabilities. Some have different connectors. Some use an older USB style. Some use USB-C. So you have to be careful what you purchase. And then you also want to somewhat be careful where you buy them from, I think. If I go too far down that rabbit hole, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but it is something that you want to keep in mind when you're purchasing those.
So MFA is really based on something you know and something you have,
And something you are.
something you are. Like your finger, like a
Right.
bio, okay.
Exactly.
So it can be
yeah.
all three.
It can be all three. and that helps authenticate you and help prove who you are.
Right. Well, as always, lots of different topics and discussion items that we have, and under the umbrella of security and security-related stuff.
And user experience.
And user experience. So a good hit on several of those just then, Bob, and we will shift gears to let Dee Dee
Everybody's favorite topic.
to talk about everybody's favorite topic.
Data, right? I know some of you all aren't as involved in data, but we really do appreciate you. I try to tell you this all the time, that you do help us pass the word along if it's not specifically applicable to you. We all think it's helpful to you just to know what's going on, and so school report card data is coming. So it's stuff that these are some items that are real pertinent for current. You've already gotten a notice about the high school feedback report. At least you did if you're a WAPOC. We sent out information about WAPOCs, giving them kind of an advance notice. We try to do that, or when we can. So you should have gotten notice last week. The high school feedback report is now available for download. Really targeting high school principals, superintendents, administrator level staff to be able to download that and look at it before it goes final. This isn't for distribution, it's just really for basically an embargo review period. We expect it to go public the end of July. So that gives everybody a little bit of time to take a look at it, raise any concerns if there are any to the Kentucky Center for Statistics. And that information was on the email. So that's kind of a heads up on that if you've not already heard. Also, school report card, seems like we just got done, but it's school report card time of year. Again, it's really a year-round topic. We're really back on schedule and anticipate the schedule to be more similar to prior years, not last year. So in the middle of July, July 15th, the Safe Schools data will open up for districts to start reviewing that data. They'll have until the end of July to review that. At the same time, mid-July, the data collection piece opens. And I know there was a lot of confusion over some of the technology stuff and whether we got the information out to folks. If you could just get ahead of it and say, hey, I'm going to put this information in to the school report card, that will get that information in. If you've already collected school level data on technology, you can enter that directly into the collector yourselves. It doesn't have to be it, or if the practice locally is somebody else enters it, you can go ahead and provide that information to them. They will actually have through August 30th to enter that data, but this is kind of your heads up that it's coming. And I know that that data is being used in the digital readiness, and some of the questions there have changed so that we are not having a duplicate data collection going forward. So just also share with your counselors, e-transcripts, just a reminder. We always get students that call us and saying, why am I having to pay? A student that graduates in May or June is considered a student until July 31st. After July 31st, they're considered alumni. Our subsidy does not pay for alumni, it only pays for students. So need all our transcripts to go out to colleges. They need to make sure that they have the graduation date and the graduation status on the transcript, or the colleges won't accept them as final. And that's when the problem normally comes up, is that college looks at it in August and finds out, oh, we don't have everything we need for this enrollment, and that goes back, and then the student has to start again. So just keep that in mind, share that information. Just a general reminder for WAPOCs to really make sure that anybody that has left, that you've ended their access, whether it be an Infinite Campus, whether it be in the SHRM system, whatever it may be, their access should be ended. If you've got new folks coming in, make sure they're set up with the right role. That information is public. It is the school and district directory. The online directory and school report card replaced the paper directory we'd had previously. So it's real important for that information to stay current. So over the summer, as you know who the new folks are going to be next year, try to get those folks added. We do have a new report in Infinite Campus. It's called the Employment Verification Report. This was a report that we actually had a district ask us about, and it made a lot of sense. A lot of work's going into having teachers interview, then you have to verify employment, you send out letters, and the other schools don't return those. If that teacher has taught in the Kentucky public school system, then that information is in Infinite Campus. So that you can actually go in and use EPSB ID number to run a report that shows where they have been and when they had taught. that can help. It can't be, it's not the authoritative source. If something doesn't look right, please question beyond that. But please help share that information with your human resources areas. We do have some changes coming in the migrant and homeless areas. That information will be shared with districts. Those are some campus core product changes. But for migrant and the homeless areas, that data collection will change going into next year. So stay tuned on that. The Safe Schools verification, I already mentioned it through school report card, but those contacts are currently reviewing through the end of June the Safe Schools extract. So that information is information that should be verified and good before it even goes into school report card. A lot of training coming up this summer. We've got our beginning of year training that is July the 11th. That'll be webcast, or people can come in here. It may be that, just help us pass that along. The agenda, when it comes out, will stay very strict to the agenda, so if people just need to come in for one session, it's very easily just to, call in, join the webcast for a specific period of time. Also, Infinite Campus is doing some training. If you've got folks that are really coming in, they're brand new and they don't know Infinite Campus, there's a Mastering Fundamentals class that's being held in Fayette County, July the 8th through the 12th. There's still some seats available in that, so if you have somebody that needs to get some training, that's a great class to go to. There's some other trainings that Infinite Campus has tried to put on that still need some people to fill seats, or they're going to have to cancel them. They've canceled 3 of the 6 that were planned, but there's still an academic planning, advanced ad hoc, and customizing campus that are still on the plate. I think those trainings were like $600 and you could take 5 people. There just hasn't been as much interest at Infinite Campus had hoped on that. So those are some high level data updates. I'll check to see if you have any questions real quick.
Well,
You can
obviously,
go ahead and talk.
very similar in the fact that all kinds of data-related stuff all going on, and obviously a good kind of just a review of some of those things and some of the things to be paying attention to, and dates coming up and so forth. So, questions, other topics that are requests come up? Phil, you've got something? Go ahead.
Got one more update, I guess, or topic. We have our firewall services going back to this another security. Almost everything revolves around security, Bob. So the firewalls that are in our school districts are we do firewall as a service, and AT&T are the ones that are the company that provides those firewalls. So we're working with AT&T. They need to do an OS upgrade sometime during the summer. So we're going to try to schedule that through the KEs, and this is something that will probably take about an hour of downtime, and we're going to try to do it, and work with school districts for the best time to do that this summer. But we want to have that done before school starts, for sure.
That's exactly where I was getting ready to ask.
Yeah.
Did we anticipate being able to have that done before
Yeah.
school starts?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. Questions that have come up? I know you've been watching it, Chuck, and you've been
No
watching it.
questions.
got one.
I've got one.
Got one. Second from the top.
Oh, it popped all the way at the top. That always
Is
throws
there a
me
guide
off.
that tells us what roles people should have in WAPOC? Something like DPP should have A, B, and C, Transportation Director should have X, Y, Z.
There's really not, because it's unique to every school and district. Some people, in some districts, transportation director might be the DAC. It's just so, so different, especially when you get in small districts and there's so many hats they wear, that there's not consistency along. Typically, we kind of rely on the districts just to, if somebody, for instance, the high school feedback report, probably asking the superintendent who do you want to have look at this. The high school principals, obviously, because it's about the high school principals. But in some areas, the district's going to take a look at it, and it may go much beyond that. But it's really a local decision. The list of roles is all out there. If you don't know what they all are, my cheat sheet is going out to the online school directory, because that kind of shows what are out there at the district level as well as the school level for roles. Not all districts assign somebody to every role, but as you make those decisions, remember, if you don't have somebody enrolled as a certain role, then you may be missing communications locally, because those distribution lists, or they're not really distribution lists, but that collection of emails is often what is used by KDE to communicate out locally. So,
All right, good deal. Something for everybody to be aware of, be proud of, is we got STLP students that are going to be in Philadelphia this coming week, representing the state. They'll you know, we got a variety of them, the different winners and some of the engineers and so forth. As we do every year, it's always one of the things I can be most proud of because I'm typically there, and I love bragging on the fact that we've got such a great STLP program and great students and great things going on here in Kentucky. So be aware of that. I know a lot of folks from schools go to ISTE, and so have an opportunity to reach out to those students and congratulate them and say hi. Our webcast in July should be on July 16th. Obviously, if something changes there, we'll advise, but I think that's the date that it's on right now. So everybody have a good afternoon and a good rest of the week and a good summer.
and we're done in an hour.
Thanks,
And they're like,
everybody.
Exactly.